Hi, welcome back to my channel, Beautiful Minutia. If you're new here, my name is Tiffany, and today I'm kind of reviewing the progress I have made so far on my Read or Rid project this year. If you're unfamiliar with my Read or Rid project, I will link that video, but just a brief synopsis is that I chose 24 books this year that have been sitting on my shelf for a really long time, or ones that I had purchased at thrift stores or whatever that I wasn't really sure if I was gonna like, so I kind of wanted to read them and then decide whether or not I could make room on my shelves for more books. So I just wanted to check in and do like kind of a progress update, which I have not done yet at all this year, and it is now in August, so it's more halfway through the year, so I probably should have done this in like July, but that's okay. So out of the books on my list, so far I have read 11 of them. A couple of them I actually did DNF, but I'm still counting that as reading them because I decided that I didn't like them and I didn't want them. The unfortunate thing is that the ones that I decided that I didn't like, I have already unhauled all of them except for one, which if I had thought about it, I would have kept them and then unhauled it after this video. But I was really trying to make room on my shelves, so unfortunately have already gotten rid of them, but I'm just going to talk about the ones that I have read and what my thoughts have been so far. So in order to help me read some of the books on this list, I have been utilizing the Buzzwordathon by Books and Lala and also the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, which is hosted by Chantel Reads All Day. And so if any of the books that I have on this list fit into those prompts, I've been using those prompts to kind of help me fulfill it. But there's been a few months that none of my books have fit those prompts, so I've had to pick regular books off my bookshelf or whatever. Otherwise, I think I would be farther in this list than I am. But let's go ahead and talk about the ones that I've read. So the first one that I completed is Where the Forest Meets the Stars. This is one that I have already gotten rid of. I did not enjoy this book. I kind of hated it, which is a shame because I liked the beginning of it and I liked the premise, but I found some very troubling writing in there, especially addressing manipulation and mental health in relationships, and just very unhealthy and kind of gross depictions of that. And also there's just a lot of other elements that just totally derailed the book, but that was the main reason why I actually hated it. Other than that, I probably would have been like, this is kind of lame, but whatever, it was fine. That made me really dislike it. So I've already gotten rid of that one. The same month in January, I also read Camilla by Madeline L'Engle, and I got one chapter into this book, and to be fair, one chapter I think was like 30 pages or something. So I did read a chunk of it, but I really didn't like the direction that the book was going in, or even the plot line, because it's about a young girl who her parents are having some marital issues and she's put in the middle, basically. Like the father suspects that the mother's having an affair and the daughter knows that the mother is having an affair. The mother's trying to manipulate and coerce her into keeping this affair a secret, and the father's trying to manipulate and coerce her into revealing this affair. And so that's just the first chapter. I was just like, no, don't want to read this. Hate all these people. I'm done. So I probably do have that sitting somewhere because it's a super old book. It was falling apart. It was like a discarded library book. So I've actually been using the pages for crafts and stuff. The next book that I read out of these was actually one of the 4 books that I decided to keep that I've read out of the 11 that I have read, and that's Never Let Me Go. And I still am not sure how I feel about this book because the way that it's written is a little strange. The plot line's kind of like it, but it's interesting too, you know, so it's weird. It's one of those ones where I'm like, do I want to save this for Claire to read someday? Because I don't think I'm going to reread it, or maybe I would. I don't know. I think I rated it 3.5 stars because it was better than just a meh, this was fine book. It was more engaging than that. But there were things about it that I didn't really enjoy. So this one was kind of iffy, but I have decided for the time being not to unhaul it. That same month, February, I read Austinlands by Shannon Hale, and I did not finish that book. I couldn't deal with it. to be honest. I was really hoping that I would enjoy it because I'm a big Jane Austen fan, but I just didn't like the main character at all, and it was a short book, so for me to not even finish it is kind of saying a lot. But it was just driving me nuts. Like, the plot line was driving me nuts. I kind of liked the setting because it's about this woman who is obsessed with Jane Austen, and no man will measure up to Mr. Darcy for her, so she decides that she's gonna go to this theme park kind of a deal where everyone dresses in Regency era clothes and speaks to each other in that way, and it's supposed to be this authentic experience. And yeah, it was very cheesy. I liked the atmosphere itself of Austinland, and it seems like it would be a really fun place to go, but the story itself was just incredibly lackluster. I've had some people tell me that the movie is better, and I watched the preview for the movie and it looks better than the book was, so maybe that's the case. And I also had the sequel, I think it's like Midnight in Austinland or whatever. I went ahead and got rid of that one at the same time because I'm like, well, there we go. I got rid of 2 books. Both of the books that I read in March are also ones that I got rid of. Moon Over Manifest. Actually, I don't think I ended up reading this one until April or May, and I actually DNF'd it, and I just didn't enjoy where the story was going, and I just wasn't liking it. So I DNF'd that one, and that one's already gone. The same with News of the World, which actually Buddy read this with my friend Dia, and I had issues with this book, unfortunately. I loved the idea of the story and the whole premise of these children who are abducted by Native Americans and then returned back to their family at some point, whether it be months or years later, and that they were incapable of reassimilating back into white culture is like a fascinating thing for me. And she actually cited some nonfiction works at the end of the book that she used to research her book. And I want to read those, but I really didn't enjoy the book. I felt like the writing was very lackluster and kind of dry, and there was no quotation marks around speech, and so it was hard to differentiate who was talking, whether it was speech or thought, and there was very glaring plot inconsistencies, so that one is gone as well. In the month of April, I read 2 more books from my Read or Read project list. The first one was The Great Gilly Hopkins, which I have unhauled, and it wasn't a terrible book. It's just not one that I think that I want to reread. There are elements to it that it just wasn't an enjoyable book, and maybe it wasn't intended to be. I feel like maybe Catherine Patterson just isn't for me. This is the second one of her books that I've read, and it's one of those weird books where it's hard for me to tell who the intended audience is age range wise, because there's content in it that I would not really want to give to a middle grade child, but then it's too childish to really feel like it's YA or adult, so I really don't know. But I just didn't enjoy it, unfortunately. I think I might have given it 3 stars because there are elements to it that I like, but I'm like, I'm never gonna reread this, and I don't really feel like passing this off to my child. The other one for that month was a DNF, but I don't feel like it's a permanent DNF. That's Life of Pi by Jan Martel. Honestly, I think how far, I still have a bookmark in here. I got 90 pages into it, so I got a little ways. I just was struggling with the book when I would try to read it. I often read until I fall asleep at night, and every time I would read this book, get a couple pages in, and then I'd fall asleep. And finally, I just wasn't motivated to pick it up anymore. But I've been told that after the main character like gets on the boat to travel with his family and these zoo animals, that the story gets better, and I never got to that part in this book. And the premise of the book intrigues me enough. I've had a lot of people tell me they didn't like it, and a lot of people tell me that they absolutely loved it and that the ending made it. And so I'm gonna give this another try. Will I finish this book this year? I don't know, but because I've read part of it and I'm still interested in it, I'll keep it on my shelves and not feel like I have to get rid of it because I've read enough to know that I want to give it another chance. In May, I read the first book from the Read or Read project that I actually loved. And that was Gregor the Overlander by Suzanne Collins. I just recently talked about this series because I got the rest of the series in a book haul. So hasn't been that long since I've mentioned this book. I thought this book was so much fun. This is a middle grade fantasy about this boy who falls through like this laundry vent or whatever in his laundry room in his New York City apartment. And he and his younger sister end up in this underworld that's beneath the world that he lives in. That's why he is called the Overlander. And it's really interesting because there's humans there. And the humans ride these giant bats, but then there's huge rats and huge spiders, and everything is so much bigger. And it's very, very interesting and unique compared to a lot of books that I've read. And Gregor's little sister kind of steals the show. She's 2 and she's so adorable. But I thought that this was a really, really fun book and I really enjoyed it. Then in June, I read another book that I loved and I feel like I have been talking about a ton, so I'm not going to talk about it a lot, but that's The Lies of Locke by Scott Lynch. I got this at a library book sale kind of on a whim. Like I got it for I think 25 cents, so I was like, oh, there's no harm. I've heard some people say that they like it, but I don't think that I will because I know it's a little more intense. I don't know if this is considered a grimdark fantasy, but there are some elements of grimdark things in here, in my opinion. Like there's some torture scenes and some things that normally would not be my jam, but for some reason, this book really worked for me and it was amazing. And I just recently hauled book 2 in this series, and I'm trying to be good and finish my summer book bingo so I can black out my board, but I'm basically counting down the days until I can pick up book 2. So this has been my absolute most successful read for my read or rid project, followed by Gregor the Overlander. So even though I have some other books here that I'm keeping, so far of the 11 books that I've read, I only have 2 books that I've actually loved. I have one more book that I'm going to talk about that I read in the month of July, and I haven't gotten rid of it yet because it's August. That's The Black Pearl by Scott Odell. Gosh, this book just was a mess for me. I just didn't enjoy it. I felt like it wasn't engaging, and it was really weird, really strange. I just recently talked about it, so I'm not going to go on and on about it, but it was weird, and I was like, why was this a Newbery Honor book? I don't get it. So those are the 11 books that I have read so far off my Read or Rid project. Will I get to all 24? I'm really, really not sure. Out of the 13 that are left, I do have 7 books that I have plans to read. They're either scheduled for prompts for the Buzzwordathon or the Read Your Bookshelf Challenge, or I have a buddy read planned or something like that. So I do have plans for some of these other books. And I also have one on here that I'm not sure that I'm going to get to, but my daughter read it. It's a middle grade book and she really liked it. And she's like, Mom, you can't get rid of that one. So someone read it. So I don't know if that counts. That book is Bluish, which I think is maybe about a cancer patient in school, but I don't know that much about it. I was just kind of intrigued by the cover, but my daughter said it was really good. Again, I haven't read it, but if I don't read it and she wants me to hang on to it, I will, because someone has read it and enjoyed it. So just as a quick review of the books I still have left to read this year, those are The School of Good and Evil, The Frog Princess. I'd rather be reading Reckless, Queen of the Tierling, To Stay Alive, The Tears of the Giraffe, The Dispossessed, The Poisonwood Bible, which I'm actually reading this month, so that one's definitely going to be read soon. The Turn of the Screw, The House of Seven Gables, White Fang, and The Zookeeper's Wife. So I have a couple of classics left, a couple of nonfiction, a couple of YA, just kind of, and some middle grade. So there's a little bit of everything that's still left on this list, but I do have plans to still read some of those books that are remaining. The other ones, I don't know. Maybe I'll do a try a chapter video, where I do a weekend vlog and I try a whole bunch of them and see if they're worth continuing, because then at least I've given them a try before I have ditched them. But most of the ones are ones that I have owned for years and never picked up. So if I'm not gonna read them, I might as well make room for new books. I'd love to hear from you in the comments down below. Have you read any of the books that I read for the Read or Read project? What were your thoughts? I hope I wasn't too harsh if I mentioned a book that you absolutely loved, because most of the books that I have read on this list were not successful for me, unfortunately. But people have different opinions and different tastes, so hopefully if you've read them, hopefully you enjoyed them a lot more than I did. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please hit like and also subscribe so you can continue to see more bookish content from me, and I will see you again next time.